I put on my cute bonnet. So I know everybody has been dying to see it. I haven't seen it in a while. So I thought I'd put my bonnet on. Actually, my hair is just atrocious today. So that's why I put on the bonnet. Let's go ahead and get started on chapter 52, Pride and Prejudice. Question number 1, according to Mrs. Gardner, what had allowed Mr. Gardner to act as he had done? Well, good question. Elizabeth had, in chapter 51, had asked her aunt and uncle what kind of reason did Mr. Darcy have for being involved at Lydia's wedding? Why was he at Lydia's wedding? And Mrs. Gardner's like, whoa, that kind of surprises me that you would ask that, because the only reason that your uncle allowed Mr. Darcy to be a part of this was because we assumed that you and Mr. Darcy were a thing, that there was something going on there, that he had a vested interest in this. Otherwise, we would not have allowed him to act as he had done. And at this point, we're still not sure what Mr. Darcy had done. So let's look at the next question. Whose fault did Wickham believe the whole problem was? Well, of course, Wickham believes the whole problem is Lydia's. It's never his problem. And we all know people like that, that imagine that they are never wrong, that they've never done anything to take the blame for. But it was her own fault. It was Lydia's fault. I had nothing to do with this. Question number 3. Although Wickham had hoped to still marry someone of wealth and position, what immediately changed his mind? Well, he found in reply to this question that Wickham still cherished the hope of more effectually making his fortune by marriage in some other country. Under such circumstances, however, he was not likely to be proof against temptation of immediate release, because Mr. Darcy had offered him a substantial amount of money to marry Lydia. And Wickham is not the kind of guy that's going to look a gift horse in the mouth. He sees immediate remuneration, immediate money, as opposed to, oh, I might find an heiress that I could get 10,000 pounds for, but it might be 10,000 pounds over a lifetime. This, you're giving me 10,000 pounds right now, which is like $1 million, remember, at least. You're giving me $1 million right now. I'll marry her, sure. Because he's immediate. He's not a planner. He's impulsive. And obviously that's what's gotten him into trouble for so long. Plus, in addition to that, he most likely needs immediate help because he probably has severe debts. And if he doesn't take care of those debts now, he might get sent to debtor's prison. He might have what we would call today loan sharks come after him. He might lose his life. So the fact that he has money that is going to be able, immediate money so he can take care of his debts, that'll let him breathe a little bit easier. Let's look at question 4. What is the real defect of Darcy's character according to Mrs. Gardner? He was very obstinate. I fancy, Lizzie, that obstinacy is the real defect of his character after all. Obstinacy. If you're obstinate, that means that you're stubborn. So Mr. Darcy was very stubborn. Question number 5. What did Mrs. Gardner ask Lizzie to not exclude her from at the end of her letter? Is actually kind of a little joke because Elizabeth has no hope at this point. Mrs. Gardner says, please, I have never been quite happy until I have been around the park at Pemberley, meaning until I've completed my walk at Pemberley. A low phaeton, which is a little carriage, kind of like a sports car. A phaeton is a sports car. Today but it was a carriage. We would equivocate it to maybe, I'm not really up on sports cars, but maybe just like a convertible Corvette or something. She's saying a nice little ride with a cute pair of ponies to drive me around the park is the very thing I need. So please remember me when that happens. And so Mrs. Gardner is saying, when Mr. Darcy proposes to you, and Elizabeth's like, there's no way in heck he's going to propose. You don't understand. Mr. Wickham is like his sworn enemy. He hates Wickham. I don't understand why he did this. I don't get it. Unless he feels the sense of grief, because he might blame himself that Lydia would be safe if he didn't put Wickham away originally or tell us about Wickham, but there's no way he's ever going to want to marry me. Ever. My chances are over with him. Question number 6. What is Elizabeth's main belief of why Darcy would not reissue his attentions to her? I just said that. Because of Mr. Wickham being the brother-in-law of Mr. Wickham, Darcy would never allow that to happen. Number 7, why was Elizabeth proud of Darcy? And I think this really shows how she has evolved and how she now loves him. And it's not just a, whoa, he's so handsome. whoa, he's got a lot of money. It's not that it ever was that for her, but she recognizes proud that in cause of compassion and honor, he had been able to get the better of himself. She was very proud of him that he was able to move beyond the sense of pride that he always had to help somebody, even though he detested the individual. And it really made her just proud of him as a person. Number 8, who overtook her as she was reading her letter from Mrs. Gardner? It was Wickham, Mr. Snotty Pants himself. He found her while she was reading this letter. And he was being a butt. He was like, oh, I understand that you were in Derbyshire and you saw Pemberley. That's fantastic. And did you happen to go here? Because he starts to, he's talking about Mrs. Reynolds, for example, the housekeeper. She was always very fond of me, but of course she did not mention my name. And Elizabeth's like, oh yeah, she did. Oh, she did? And what did she say? And Elizabeth says that you were gone into the army and she was afraid that you had turned out not very well at all. And then Elizabeth kind of lets a pause and she goes, but you know, when you don't see somebody for a while, things are strangely misinterpreted. And he goes, oh yes, of course, things are misinterpreted. And then he said, I was surprised to see Darcy last month in town. And Elizabeth's like, yeah, maybe he was there for something particular to take him, you know, who knows. Did you see him while you were in Lambton? And she said, yeah, the Gardners and I both saw him. Did he introduce his sister? Yes. Did you like her? Oh, I liked her very much. And then Wickham has the audacity to say, I have heard indeed that she has uncommonly improved within this year or two. When I last saw her, she was not very promising. I'm very glad you like her. I hope she will turn out well. And then Elizabeth jabs him and says, I dare say she will. She has got past the most trying time of her life, meaning you jerk, you did that to her. And then he immediately changes the subject. Question number 9. What village was Elizabeth asked if she went by when she was at Pemberley? The village of Kimpton, because Wickham's like, oh, because that's the living that I was supposed to have. So I'm glad that you saw it. And then Elizabeth says, I have heard from authority, which I thought was good, that it was left you conditionally only and at the will of the present patron. Oh, yeah, I guess that's true, Wickham says. And then she says, and I also heard that there was a time that sermon making was not palatable to you, and that you actually declared your resolution not to take orders to become a minister, and that you were compensated accordingly, meaning you were given money. And you never told, yeah, well, you might remember that I mentioned something of that. And Elizabeth's like, whatever. She's like, you know what? Let's not argue. We're brother and sister now. So let's just put everything behind us. And he's like, I agree. What a fool. I hope you're enjoying it, ladies and gentlemen. That's the end of chapter 52. I will see you in a minute for chapter 53 or in 20 minutes or whenever. Bye, guys. Love ya.